Alright, what is up you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another book review. This time I'm reviewing Star Wars Tarkin, written by James Luceno. Now I was excited for this one because growing up as a Star Wars fan, and this being one of the first novels that's officially canon since Disney bought the rights, and Tarkin being one of the kind of iconic characters, or like a secondary character, I was excited to learn more about him. So without further ado, let's dig into it. Now, kind of like I alluded to already, I do want to preface this review by saying I am a fan. I remember growing up watching the original trilogy in my living room, laying on the ground with my dad next to me in his Lazy Boy. And I even remember going into theaters when I was 7 or 8 to see Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, with my dad, my older brother. And I just remember that being one of the coolest cinematic experiences I've ever been in. It was like that in Return of the King from Lord of the Rings. Those two are probably my favorite, probably nostalgia-wise a lot, but also just kind of made me fall deeper in love with Star Wars, and just how cool the galaxy really is, you know, and how, and I've always thought that if it's a whole galaxy, there's probably a lot of stories to be able to be told, right? So that's, again, why I was excited to kind of get into more Star Wars things when my actually older brother gave me a few books, and this just happened to be one of them. And I was interested in this one specifically over some of the other ones he's given me in Star Wars because it follows Tarkin, hence the name Star Wars Tarkin, right? But it's interesting because this is placed, I think it was like 4 or 5 years after the Clone Wars, so basically after the events of Episode 3. In many years before Episode 4, A New Hope. And the way this was kind of set up, it seems like, especially after reading the synopsis, it seems like that what James was going for was kind of like a buddy cop movie between Darth Vader and Tarkin, which didn't really work, in my opinion. But also kind of an origin story for Tarkin, which is kind of what I was more looking forward to reading as well, kind of where he got his origins from, because he's like a secondary character, right? Because in the original trilogy, he's one of the head honchos right after the Emperor and after Darth Vader, right? So he's like, and he's very menacing, right? Like, look at the guy, he's menacing. So again, I was excited to get into it, especially kind of from this perspective of someone in the Empire, and not from the perspective of the rebellion. This is even before there is a rebellion. So yeah, I was just kind of, that was kind of my frame of mind going into this book, and I was kind of met with disappointment. I'll say. I guess before I get into like spoilers, my overall score for this book out of 10 is 5.6. So just kind of edging out to like, it's okay, right? Like, I'm glad I read it. Like, I didn't feel like it was a complete waste of time. But I don't know if I would completely recommend it unless you really feel like you want to consume Star Wars for the sake of consuming Star Wars. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that before I get into spoilers. So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, click off now. But yeah, without further ado, let's keep digging into it. And for those who haven't watched any of my reviews, I break down my reviews into 5 different categories, or I rate 5 different categories out of 10, and then I average those. So that's how I get the 5.6. That's why it's like precise, right? So the first category I rate is emotional impact, and I gave emotional impact 5.75 out of 10. And just for the sake that the book was kind of boring. Overall, there were parts, well, and kind of knowing, having watched the films, right? You know that Darth Vader, the Emperor, and Tarkin aren't in any real danger because they have to survive to appear on film many years later, right? So that kind of takes some of the gravity or the weight out of some of the conflict. It's kind of a big thing. So that's kind of limiting a little bit. With kind of the story that was trying to be told. But even the story that was told, even when there wasn't high stakes, that knowing that they're going to survive anyway, it's still kind of boring. It seemed like I feel like Star Wars sometimes falls into this thing where, oh, we have to track down this person or this thing, and then but how do we get to that person? It's like, oh, I heard that this person's their friend. Let's go talk to this person that is that person's friend. And then they go talk to the friend. They're like, oh, I haven't talked to that person in years, but I heard that this person has talked with them recently. So then they kind of go on this wild goose chase, and it just bounces from place to place, and without anything really happening. And kind of all while this is happening, or the lack of things happening, I should say, you kind of get a little bit of origin story of Tarkin kind of peppered in there, with like the explanation of him being on or growing up on a rimworld planet. I think it's called Iridu. I don't know. It's the first time I ever heard of it. Kind of like a jungle, volcanic wasteland, sort of. But then they got conquered from colonists with technology. That's kind of this whole thing, that having his uncle, or his great uncle actually, Jova, kind of mentoring him in like taking him out in the wilderness and teaching him how to survive with his own two hands and with like minimal technology. Like that was interesting. That was cool. And I don't feel like we got enough of that, in my opinion, except when we did, it was this very long, like exposition monologue type thing that kind of made a cool thing seem boring, in my opinion. But I think it did an okay job. This is kind of getting characters a little bit, but it kind of did an okay job explaining Tarkin's motives and his rationale and just how, like, why his core is like made of steel and why he's a hard man, right? So that was interesting, but kind of the whole him losing his ship to rebellion people. That was stupid, in my opinion. Like that should have never happened. Especially like because him and Darth Vader, they're the two biggest guys after the Emperor in the Empire, right? So you would think they would have a little bigger contingency, or like more of a contingency plan, or just more troops to follow him around. Like they have, I think it was like 8 people that were like Darth Vader's bodyguards, and they have them go on these they go and find these scrap droid parts from the Clone Wars that they think fell into enemy hands, that they were using, that the Separatists made, right? And so then they go to this planet and they find the cache, and then they have their 8 stormtroopers kind of sort through the stuff, and then when they go back to their ship, there is no ship, because there were people that knew they were just the whole way it fell was, in my opinion, just stupid. And things just happen and then explain later. Like 200 pages later. Like, oh, well, because Tarkin's so smart, he can find patterns in these things, and because he found the patterns, he found that it's these people that used to be part of the Republic, and then they didn't like what the Empire was doing. So it's like kind of the motives of those people make sense, but just the way it was discovered didn't make sense to me. I don't know. I was kind of taken out of it a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, emotional impact I found just boring a little bit, and some of the bite was taken out of it just because the characters have to survive. Next is characters. I rated that a 6, which is one of the highest things I rated. And really the 3 characters that carry it are Tarkin, Darth Vader, and the Emperor, which thankfully is kind of the main POVs. The main POV really is Tarkin, but then the secondary are Darth Vader a little bit and the Emperor, like a handful of pages. And then the other POV characters are the Rebellion, ex-Republic, Empire scientists in military guys. It's like a handful of 5 or 6 of them that ended up stealing Tarkin's personal ship. It's called the Carrion Spike, or Karin Spike, which actually has roots back to him being in the wilderness and on his home planet, because his last trial to prove he's a man and he's a Tarkin worthy of ruling was at Carrion Spike. So that's explained. So that, again, that's kind of cool. Kind of explains the character of Tarkin a little bit. But that's kind of the extent of the coolness. Everything else just really falls flat because I feel like, again, you kind of have to focus on the rebellion characters a little bit, kind of understand their motivations, understand what they're doing, to create a conflict, so you can follow and have a plot and push stuff along, right? So you have to do that. But I feel like the characters that we followed, in my opinion, again, were just boring and I didn't care about. I'm sorry, I didn't. I was here for Darth Vader and Tarkin and even the Emperor, and we focus on characters that I did not care about, in my opinion. Yeah, I just didn't. So that's why characters isn't higher on my list, as far as rating, just because it followed characters that I didn't care about, and I forgot their names every time they were introduced. Or like when it said a name, like I don't even know who this person is, but I just know they're a rebellion person, so whatever. Until at the very end when Teller tracks down Tarkin when Tarkin visits his home world again. And then Tarkin knows he's there and he sets a trap for him and then he traps him and then... So that's the only person I remember by name is Teller, who was the ex-military guy that kind of headed that whole operation. So that was kind of it. So yeah, characters, again, fell flat. In plot, this is the lowest rated thing. The plot, I did not actually like. This I rated as a 4.75. And again, if it was closer to like a buddy cop where Darth Vader and Tarkin are kind of bopping around the galaxy trying to track these people, like in kind of almost more fun or more entertaining, I think I would have liked it a lot more. But it really fell flat for me. Again, just following characters that I didn't care about, or that these rebellion characters have a plan for everything, even though this is the first time they're flying this high-tech ship that has like cloaking technology and like very advanced weaponry that no other ship has, and they're just able to like, oh yeah, I know exactly what's... I don't know. I didn't like that. But then also Darth Vader and Tarkin get along, but also they're kind of like on a knife's edge, like whether they're like at each other's throats. You know, they're just like very high tension, which makes sense a little bit where it's like Darth Vader, he's gonna force choke somebody out on the flip of a switch. So it kind of, but also Tarkin holds his own when they kind of go at it, when they argue. So that was kind of interesting a little bit, but again, just the plot itself didn't make sense to me. I thought it was kind of stupid, honestly. It was, I guess, one of the redeeming things is that they kind of focus on, in the background, kind of focusing on the building of the Death Star, because that was released, or that was started production again at the end of episode 3, and this is like 4 or 5 years after. So it does kind of talk about like supply issues. That's kind of what Tarkin's been dealing with the last couple of years, making sure like the building schedule is on time, there's no delays, making sure that like suppliers are giving what they need. So that was a little interesting, kind of like the logistics of everything. That's the word I'm looking for. But just the actual chase around the galaxy to find a ship that's decimating these other like Imperial outposts. Like, I thought that was stupid, honestly. Because I think there could have been a better story, kind of talking more about Tarkin's origins, where this kind of does that, but also trying to tell a new story. So I don't know. Again, I didn't like it. That's what I'm trying to get at. Next, with dialogue and prose, this is the 4th category I rate. I rated this as a 5.5. Again, kind of boring a little bit. Again, it's kind of space talky stuff. So, although it wasn't as bad as Star Wars Aftermath, written by Chuck Wendig, that was atrocious dialogue and prose. I haven't talked about that on the channel, but if you guys want me to, let me know in the comments, and I will put myself through that, and I will probably even have to reread it because I blocked out a lot of that book. But I just remember terrible dialogue and terrible prose. But this one again was just kind of boring. Sometimes when it was Tarkin and the Emperor and Vader sitting in on these different like intelligence and military meetings, and like these other high intelligence and like admirals kind of just yelling at each other about stupid stuff, talking about like random planets that I've never heard of before, or random territories, or like different systems. Again, I get it. It's Star Wars. It's spacey stuff. They're going to have some techno-babble, but it was just kind of to a point where it just seemed really silly, in my opinion. And that kind of falls in world building a little bit, which I rated as a 6, which again, a higher thing. But one of the cool things I did like about the world building, again, was kind of exploring Tarkin's homeworld a little bit, and exploring like Clan Tarkin and his family roots, and just how he, again, became like a hard ass man, basically, just through the wilderness of his homeworld. That was cool. But also another snippet that I actually thought was cool, it was only like a page or two though. It's when Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, was below what used to be the Jedi Temple, like very, very deep below, was a shrine, or excuse me, a Sith shrine that he was meditating at, and just kind of explaining a little bit, like, oh, it's been here for millennia, and it, like even the most in tune, like masterful Jedi had no idea it was here, and the few that did, like they had it capped, and they thought no dark force or force, the dark side of the force. Wow, I'm really struggling. Thinking that no dark side force was escaping, but Sidious of course knew it was, and just so little tidbits like that were good. But again, kind of a lot of the world building was just kind of name dropping random systems in planets that I haven't heard of, or aliens that it's like I have to look up. So it's like taking me away from the book. And again, so overall, I'm glad I read it, so I can say I read it. But I don't know if I'd really recommend it. So yeah, what do you guys think? Have you guys read Tarkin? Are you guys looking forward to reading Tarkin? Or maybe not so much anymore because I kind of didn't care for it. Again, it wasn't terrible. Like it wasn't like Dracula boring where I had to like force myself to read it. Like it was interesting enough where it's like, okay, let's see what happens next. Darth Vader, we know is coming back. Like let's kind of see how he interacts with Tarkin. You know, the Emperor, you know, so it was like little tidbits like that. Was interesting. But not enough. Like if they had a direct sequel to this, I don't know if it'd be enough for me to like want to read that. So yeah. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Tarkin. Yeah. So if you guys like this review, please hit like down below. Want to see more from me, Diggerdan? Please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon down below so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one.